It's 1 a.m. The house is completely dead quiet. You're lying there, just staring at the glowing screen of your phone. You've got this message typed out, or maybe it's just a thought endlessly looping in your head, but your thumb is just frozen, hovering right over that send button. Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into a really profound piece of writing called Midnight Reflection, and we're going to unpack exactly why so many of us hoard unsent messages and unsaid words. Spoiler alert, it's usually because we're terrified of what happens after we actually speak up. But as we're going to see, holding all that in, it carries a pretty steep hidden cost. Let's just be real for a second and acknowledge a universal truth here. Avoidance simply feels easier. It really does. Dodging a difficult interaction is incredibly comfortable in the short term. But here's the catch. Constantly backing away from those uncomfortable conversations, the tough messages, or letting people down, it creates this heavy, lingering anxiety. Actually, it's that exact anxiety that keeps us tossing and turning at night in the first place. So why on earth do we willingly carry around this heavy weight? Let's look at how this plays out in our everyday lives. A lot of the time, it's just because we totally overcomplicate basic everyday logistics. Think about a classic scenario. You go on a date. It goes fine, but there's just zero chemistry. You know in your gut it's not right. So what do you do next? The absolute easiest, most comfortable path is to just sort of fade away. Which brings us to the ultimate modern dilemma: ghosting versus sending a text. Man, it is so tempting to just vanish into thin air. But consider the alternative. Just sending a quick, simple text saying, "Hey, I don't think we're the right fit." Doing that is undeniably awkward in the moment. No one likes doing it. However, the second you hit send, the wave of relief is huge. Plus, you're actually showing respect for the other person instead of leaving them completely hanging. And what's fascinating is how this exact same logic perfectly applies to our work lives too. Say you're really frustrated with a team member. Instead of quietly holding a grudge and letting it fester, you have a choice. You can talk it out. Again, super uncomfortable to let them know where you stand, but it clears the air. And here's the thing, you don't need to go in there breathing fire. You don't need harsh words. You don't need anger. You literally just need to say it. Oh, and calendars, we see this avoidance all the time in how we manage our schedules. We have absolutely all fallen into this trap. You agree to an event, realize later you're double booked, and what's our default reaction? We wait until the very last possible second, and then suddenly we develop this incredibly mysterious, highly contagious fake emergency. But instead of creating all this totally avoidable chaos, we should just tell people the second we spot the conflict. It gives them the actual time they need to adjust their plans. Let's peel back another layer here and look at vulnerability. What happens when we simply mess up our time management and can't deliver on a promise? It happens to every single one of us. But instead of hiding from the failure because we're embarrassed, just letting people know opens the door to something pretty amazing. Admitting we need help is definitely intimidating, but it is deeply, deeply necessary. Because here is the absolute best secret. Everything is figure-outable. It really is. When you stop hiding from that missed deadline and just ask for an extension, you completely change the dynamic. Problems get solved surprisingly fast when you actually talk them through with other people. Someone else on your team has probably gone through the exact same thing, and they might have a brilliant solution you'd never ever think of while sitting there isolating yourself. This perfectly illustrates how just a tiny, tiny bit of communication can relieve a massive amount of pressure. Picture getting a super long, demanding email right when you're in the middle of a big project. Instead of leaving it unread until you have an hour to write the perfect response, just shoot back a quick note. "Hey, I'm tied up at the moment, but I'll get back to you." That simple acknowledgement stops the message from haunting your inbox, and you can even ask them to bump it back to you later if it slips your mind. Getting out in front of things like this is absolutely crucial, especially on a team. When things go sideways, our first instinct is usually to cross our fingers and hope the problem magically fixes itself, right? Or we delay talking about it because we're terrified of the reaction. But the reality is clear. You've got to put it on the table ASAP. Almost all mistakes are infinitely easier to solve when you catch them early. Hiding them out of fear? That's just a recipe for disaster. A difficult conversation today is always, always gentler than a massive crisis tomorrow. Now, let's take a breath and pause here for a second, because sometimes you just do not have the energy for these conversations. Sometimes you are emotionally drained, grieving, exhausted, or just completely burnt out. You aren't in the right headspace, and that's okay. Instead of putting on a fake smile or just ghosting everyone, it is 100% acceptable to step back. You can literally just say, "I can't really handle this right now. Can you give me a bit of time?" Saying that feels intensely vulnerable, doesn't it? Most of the time, we avoid asking for a break because we are absolutely terrified that people are going to judge us. But here is a wonderfully comforting reminder. That fear, it's usually just noise in our own heads. We are almost always way harsher on ourselves than anyone else will ever be. The fundamental truth here is that people cannot possibly understand what you're going through if you never tell them.
But we don't just avoid the difficult conversations. What about the really good ones? Are we actually saying the things that matter most? Because beyond just fixing conflicts, there's this quiet, incredible everyday power in expressing gratitude and apologies out loud. These are things we often feel so deeply in our hearts, but we rarely ever take the time to verbalize them.
We have got to start saying thank you and I'm sorry when it matters, even for the tiny things. The examples from the text are so grounding. Apologizing to the cleaner because you accidentally stepped on the floor they just mopped. Thanking the server who brought you water at the restaurant. These literally cost you nothing, but they completely acknowledge another human being's effort. You never ever know what someone is going through, and your one simple thank you might just make their whole day a little lighter.
The real takeaway here is that we have to stop hoarding all these quiet, positive thoughts. We need to tell people what they mean to us. Think of it like a checklist for your life. Tell a friend you're incredibly proud of them. Tell a mentor that their advice actually changed your trajectory. Tell your parents you appreciate all the sacrifices they made. We walk around with so much positive energy locked inside our heads, and it doesn't do a single person any good until we finally let it out.
And we need to tell them while they are still here to hear it. This challenges a really massive assumption we all make. Most of us carry these loving thoughts silently because we just assume our friends, our mentors, our family already know how we feel. Well, maybe they do and maybe they don't. But either way, saying it out loud costs you almost nothing, and it can mean a whole lot more to them than we could ever realize. Which brings us to the big, overarching question of this whole explainer. Will you choose peace over comfort? Avoiding difficult messages, avoiding vulnerability, holding back our love. Sure, it might be comfortable to stay quiet today. But the core lesson we're pulling from this is that honesty is ultimately far more respectful, and in the long run, it brings us so much more peace. Honestly, this might just be what maturity actually looks like. Growing up isn't about suddenly waking up one day and being totally fearless. It's about learning that showing up and speaking honestly, even when it's wildly inconvenient or awkward, brings us way more peace of mind than running away ever could. It's finding that quiet courage to just face the awkwardness head on. Sometimes the absolute bravest thing you can do all day is simply hitting send. Stepping out of that cozy little bubble of avoidance and sending the honest text, asking for the extension, or finally saying thank you. That is exactly what helps us finally get a good night's sleep. That instant relief when you press send, that's the very first step toward genuine peace of mind. So, I want to leave you with one final, lingering question to think about in the quiet moments after this explainer ends. Think about your own phone. Think about those unsent drafts sitting in your notes app. Think about the apologies, the boundaries, or the gratitude that you've been holding back. Based on everything we've talked about today, what message are you going to send tonight?